ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another exhilarating episode of the Indic Explorer show. Today, I'm beyond excited to introduce a phenomenal guest, a man whose voice not only commands attention, but is coupled with a fervor for addressing some of the most critical issues of our time. Widely known as the Hrithik Roshan of the podcasting world, he is more than just a pretty face. He is a thought leader and a visionary, someone who brings unique perspectives consistently and ignites conversations that truly matter. Beyond the microphone, he's a dear friend, someone who genuinely strives to make a positive impact in the world. Brace yourselves for an engaging conversation as we explore his thoughts, experiences, and the riveting journey that he has been on. So, without further ado, let's welcome our guest tonight, Vineet Vijayaraghavan. Vineet, welcome to the Indic Explorer show.
Wow, I mean, that is better than even I would have done. Great job. Thank you for inviting me on my own show. It's a special episode. It's like a year-end episode. And, we discussed offline as well that I kind of wanted you to host the show and I wanted to be the guest. And it's like something special we want to do for the year-end. So, yeah, it's great.
Right, so this is going to be a really fun episode. So, let's start with why am I hosting this episode?
Well, this is an interesting question. So, firstly, like I said, the idea was to do a slightly different variant of the regular show, keep it fun and casual. And also, I felt like hosting a lot of episodes. I think I'm one of like the hosts who likes to give the center stage to the guest, and I don't really like to hog too much time. So I intervene where necessary and I ask questions wherever it piques my curiosity. So I felt like somewhere I wanted to communicate with the audience as well. And probably that would be possible when I become the guest, because I don't speak much as the host. So that was the idea. And the reason I picked you was that, you are one of the people that I have met because of the show, and you're not a guest. So you were like that one true, I don't know, a fan or an audience person who, really, I mean, there is a story behind how we connected, and I saw, like, you had seen some episode of mine. Probably you can talk about it.
Yeah, okay. So, the first episode of yours that I saw, chronologically speaking, was the episode that you did with Culture Designs. I watched that just to understand the culture angle of it. I was searching for something and it came up. I had no idea that was you when I first talked to you because I'd forgotten that episode that you were the one who was hosting it. Then I saw your episode with Abhivardhan about Indic modernity, and that was when I started following your podcast. And I did a Twitter thread on it because I found that episode quite engaging. You guys made some interesting points that I had not thought about before. So I wanted to make a Twitter thread on it. So I kind of summarized what your episode was. And then that tended to become a habit after that. I summarized your episode with Salvatore Babonis and I think a couple of other of your episodes. And so once I started doing those threads, then we connected. And that's when I think you and I started talking and we engaged on a lot of different topics. And you've been telling me about your plans for the podcast, and I felt the world needs to hear it as well. And I mean, this is also a way for you to show your audience that if they are kind enough about you on social media, then they will also perhaps one day get a chance to host a show with the rising YouTube cosmos. Okay, so let's get into your story. How did you first get into podcasting, and what inspired you to start your own show? Tell us that story.
This is an interesting part because my I have been following podcasts much earlier than most people in India have been, in the sense that Indian podcasting is a very recent phenomenon, essentially post COVID, where the trend really caught fire. But if most people would say 3 4 years before that itself, 2016, 17, 18, people started listening to Western podcasts. My journey with listening to podcasts is 2009. Like, it's very very old, because I was a huge WWE and wrestling fan, and wrestling has a huge subculture of podcasting. So I used to watch a lot of America, like here at that time it was more of audio, hear a lot of audio podcasts. And for 4 5 years I would have just heard a lot of wrestling podcasts. Then I suddenly veered into geopolitics. And then of course by 2017 2018 the podcasting boom, and you had, you know, your big podcasters in the US who used to talk about civilizational political issues as well. So I also I started listening to those as well, like Joe Rogan and all of those. But yeah, I have been listening to a podcast for a long time. In fact, this is a fun story. I actually, so I always wanted to do something on video, but I wasn't very sure. I was always kind of hesitant because of cancel culture and all of that. So I actually in 2016 or so, I had started an audio podcast, and I even shot 4 5 episodes, and I would put the clips on YouTube. I'm not going to tell the name of that podcast. You will have to search it. It's still there. I haven't deleted it. I would say that I
Yeah,
did quite a horrible
you can tell
job.
me offline.
Yeah, 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 sure. I mean, so that's like a homework assignment. But yeah, so audio podcasts, I did them as an experiment. Uh, I was writing a novel at that time. So I was into a lot of book writing and book marketing podcasts. So my podcast was essentially around writing and talking to writers and all of that. Yeah, and I had also interviewed India's first, like not first, but amongst the early libertarians, who was a friend of mine, Jaimin Vaishnav. So I had done 4 5 shows of that nature. They were all audio with just an image on the top, and well, I thought that the quality of the conversation was fine, but it just fizzled out. And this mic that I have was actually purchased that time, and then I just put it somewhere in the dump and forgot about it.
Okay.
And my story from there, I completely, I was completely off. I just used to consume podcasts, and then COVID happened. And when COVID happened, there was this phenomenon that happened in Clubhouse where people would go and have, audio conversations. And I found talking on an audio social media to be much more easier, because your face, your name, etc., doesn't need to be
So
out
tell the
there.
audience what Clubhouse is in case they're not familiar with it.
So it's an
Okay.
audio social media app, and where people actually make social rooms and they come and talk about topics. Mostly people come with their own names. They can also come with pseudonyms. I did come with a pseudonym. And it really took off very, very well in India during COVID, because people were at home. They didn't know what to do, and you just had to go put your mic on and talk about topics. And I just started talking about a lot of issues, uh, socio-cultural, political, civilizational, and I somehow found a lot of traction there. And there was an entire subculture on Clubhouse of people talking on such topics, which was in many ways not even there in the mainstream, like things on Indic modernity as well,
Right.
right? So I found this quite refreshing and engaging. And then through Clubhouse, I got an opportunity to engage with a lot of prominent thinkers of our time who also started showing up on Clubhouse. So I started interacting with a lot of people. Like, for example, I met Vibhuti Jha over in Clubhouse. I literally connected with a lot of the who's
Right.
who, of the great thinkers of our time in Clubhouse. And through those
Right.
conversations, I was able to actually drive a personal connect with them. So I would say that my podcast in some ways represents how an unknown person with no connections, no family background, just with a lot of new ideas, was able to throw that around in the ecosystem, and it just rose from the grassroots. And from there, I met Edward Butler, who is basically a Greek pagan, and he works with Indic Academy. And through him, I was able to actually get a speaking opportunity in the World Polytheist Conference for Indic Academy. So all of
That
that
sounds
happened,
incredible.
and then from there, I get an opportunity because Indic Academy was funding a lot of Indic young content creators, and one thing led to another. It was like a nuclear fission reaction, just it just kept going from one place to another. And I mean, I can't even believe that. I mean, I just started a Twitter account after Clubhouse, and from there, I never really thought I would even go where I have reached. So it's kind of, I mean, I still can't believe it. I have to pinch myself sometimes.
So how do you go from Twitter to YouTube? When did you start? What's the story there?
So, so I used to do a lot of Twitter threads, Twitter posts, give my reactions. I got a chance to speak at the Indic Academy conference, like I mentioned, and then I connected with Hari, and I pitched an idea for a podcast. I had to write a Harvard business essay, to get funding. I had an entire like presentation made as to what the idea of the podcast is, who is the audience, how exactly I intend to kind of, what gap am I filling? Because there are a lot of people who are in this space. So, what is the new thing that I'm bringing into the picture? So I made an entire proposal and he liked the idea. And my podcast, interestingly, was supported from day one, So, from the, in term,
That's pretty
yeah,
incredible.
yeah, yeah.
It's very rare that that happens, right?
Yeah. So from the starting, but again, that was the only thing. So while there was just some help in terms of finding the right person for editing and sponsoring the editing, all the other things I had to do of my own. So that was quite a challenge because I didn't know about how to run a podcast, especially a video podcast. So I had it's interesting how one thing leads to another. So I had spoken in P Guru's Jaipur dialogues, and I was known as this unknown face called the Indic Explorer. And I had essentially Brown Pandit's podcast is a place where I had gone on an audio podcast, and Roshan Kariyappa from the Bharat Varta podcast had heard about my show and all of that. So in some Twitter thread, there was another podcaster who had written that if you want to know about editing or want to connect with the right people, you should reach out to Roshan, not to me but to someone else. I heard that, I reached out to him, and I said, I'm the Indic Explorer. And he said, yeah, I know about you. And I was like, wow, I didn't know that I'm supposed to be known already. So he had heard about my podcast in the Brown Pundits. So he, really liked that show where I had spoken on Indic modernity to some extent and Indian history and all of that. So he said, yeah, get in touch. And I got in touch with him. He said that we could do a joint collaboration, and so my first episode was actually a collaboration video with the Varta Pod. Actually, my episode 0, my pilot episode, was an experimental one, and it was quite horrible, and I didn't me and Roshan decided not to go ahead with it, so we didn't even post it. And because I had called a couple of kids from Clubhouse and we had done a show, and it went into very uh, completely different routes in terms of the topic and what we had planned. So we canned that, and I did my first show with a Badaga tribal Hindu like AI based artist called Ari Jaiprakash, who lives in Uti, and it was like an amazing show where he had been an artist and who had traveled across India, and he was a lot into an underground artistic movement, so we covered a lot of artwork, AI art, and it was a different kind of topic to start with. But my podcast was in that sense what you would call pejoratively a Raita Wing podcast, but what I would call as Indic modernity. So I felt like it represented as a show something that kind of combines the old and the new.
Okay, so explain the Raita Trad dichotomy a bit.
So this is again not something that
Okay,
I have come up with. This has already existed as a subculture on the internet. So I think Abhinav Prakash makes the
explain what Raita means.
yeah. So Abhinav Prakash, I think, was the one who synthesized this. But although Rahul Roshan was the first one, I think, who started this. So there are three wings in the Indic civilizational movement: the traditionalists, who are pejoratively called the trads; the conservatives, who are also called as the Sanghis; and the liberal libertarian civilizationalists, who are pejoratively called Raitas, and who I have coined a term for is Indic modernists. So where they are kind of defined is that the traditionalists basically all of them are united by one stream of thinking, which is that they believe in the dharmic civilizational ethos, you know, of Indic civilization. They look at the Indic culture as the common thread that binds India together, but at the same time, where they differ is on what they feel is important. So the traditionalists want to revive the past. They look at a certain part of the past as our golden age. So they want to revive that aspect of the past. The conservatives. So traditionalism and conservatism is different in the sense that the conservatives have do hold the past values as dear, but they also feel that you need to kind of handle the challenges of the present. So they have one leg in the past and one in the present, and they believe in incremental change. The nature of change is much more slower. And then the third wing is the the Raita wing, or the Indic modernists, who kind of believe that you need so yes, you need to have a link with the past, you need to study the past, but then you need to learn lessons from them for the present and give and present a civilizational vision for the future. Whether you call it Vishwaguru or whether you call it Indic Renaissance, whatever you want to call that, there has to be a vision for the future. So they are very impatient with just analyzing the past. They are less reactionary, more open to newer ideas which come from outside, but also they are rooted in the culture. Having said that, they are not stuck with the fact that the golden age was in the past. They do look at it as a vibrant time, but they want to create a golden age in the now and the future. That is where they differ from. So they are not obsessed about the past. They want to learn from the past, but they want to solve the problems in the here and now. That is where I think these three sides, or I don't want to call them sides, the wings, they kind of, they are like sub classifications of the larger Indic ecosystem.
Right. So to steelman that position, what you're saying is that
So yeah,
the Indic modernists want to have both vertical and horizontal integration. They want to learn from the past as well as from other elements that coexist with us in the present, to pick up ideas and synthesize it with
absolutely
what we have from our vertical inheritance, and to map a way forward.
correct. And also with Indic modernists, they are kind of uh, they differ from decoloniality in the sense that decoloniality is largely, I mean, I hate to use the word, but it's an intersectionality of the traditionalists, with whom the decolonial movement in some ways, or decoloniality as a concept, is largely co-opted, at least in the civilizational side, by by the traditionalists. So they slightly differ. While they agree on the civilizational renaissance, they don't necessarily agree with all the arguments made on decoloniality. Some they do agree with, they don't. And I don't, this is what I feel: no idea can be just rejected in its entirety. So they might agree with decolonizing, in the sense that if you see, there are some laws that Amit Shah has recently bought in terms of criminal codes. Like, for example, in the past, the British made laws in terms of controlling the population. If you jail someone who's from the freedom movement, there is a certain way in which you look at a prisoner, rather than how an Indian state would look at its citizens whom they are imprisoning. Like, so there is a certain way in which those codes have to be amended and move forward. So those kind of aspects of decoloniality actually may be in agreement for the modernists. But I think, so I would not completely reject that hypothesis. There are definitely some merits to it, especially the fact that, of course, for 800-900,000 years, we were colonized by the sultanates, the Turkic sultanates, as well as the British. So there are some parts that we may, that we need to be very careful of. At the same time, we cannot, how do I say it? There has been a historical trajectory of our experience. We cannot just abandon that trajectory and move
Path
forward.
dependencies.
So there are certain, and even if we were, yeah, path dependence, and even if there was no colonization, we would have had a trajectory. We would not have been stuck in a time warp in the 10th century. We would have moved forward. So, even from that perspective, if you look at it, the idea is that we have to be in the modern world. While our cultural core values will remain the same, the Shruti or the Shrauta part, the Smriti for the current world has to change with time, has to evolve with time. So we can't be looking at the past to recreate it. We can look at the past to solve some problems that we have today and then build something new on them. But we cannot go from the intention of recreating the past.
Are you suggesting that we contemporize
Exactly.
practice?
That's
Are you suggesting that we contemporize practices to make it pertinent to the issues that we are facing in today's superstructure of industrial
exactly
modernity?
contemporize, because modernity as a word
All right.
is,
So
I will,
you are in the right
so
wing.
I don't want to use that word because it's a pejorative. I would not use the word trad also. I would use the word
Okay.
traditionalists because both of those two words are pejoratives. So I wouldn't want to fall into that
So
trap.
you believe yourself to be part of the modernist wing.
Yes,
Is that a fair thing to say?
exactly. Correct.
Okay. So you were in the modernist wing. Now continue your story. How do you get to this point in the
So I
podcast?
felt like a lot of the civilizational narrative is seen from the conservative and also heavily from the traditionalist side. But it is not well articulated. uh, there are a few people, but it's not well articulated in a cohesive manner, in a very structured fashion, from the modernist side. So then that position remains unanswered. So the other position is not steel manned also. See, I am not someone who believes in confrontation. So it's not the idea that you have to oppose someone for the sake of opposing. You are presenting a point of view. So I do not believe in negationism. I believe in some positive way of putting across your view. So it is not that it is opposed to something. It is that this also is an alternative that people
Right.
need to know as a legitimate option. That's what it is.
Right. So Purva Paksha, then Samanvay.
Yes, correct.
All right. So you started your podcast. Tell us your story on that.
So yeah, the podcast starts that way, and then slowly I branch out on my own. So
Hmm.
apart from the editing, everything else was handled by me, and even the editorial feedback was something that I used to do. So there was a lot of strain in terms of, because this is a passion, right, for me, and I don't really make any money, to be honest. It's not that big also, and that's not the idea. The idea is to present a point of view. So this is something that I would say, in the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it's my self-actualization needs that I'm kind of chasing after here. So I was truly passionate about it. So I started connecting with guests. Initially, the first 4 or 5 podcasts, I was trying to find my feet, and I used to go by the name of the Indic Explorer. And then my first podcast, which was like the proper mainstream one, which I would say, I think it was my sixth or seventh episode, where I invited Guru Prakash on my show. So before that, if you look at with the first 3 4 and I honestly, I don't delete my initial work because it is a part of my growing up journey. So if it is embarrassing, so be it. But I would say the quality of the discussions was great. But I used to wear sunglasses and a skull cap, and I was quite. It was like a pseudo personality that I was trying to create. But then the show with Guru Prakash happened, and I realized that now I have to make it more serious. And that's where I came with my name. I kind of started branding the show a little bit, had a proper logo. The logo was there, but I made it much more structured. And I would say that the first 20 25 episodes or so, I was hiring different editors, and I was heavily involved in the podcast. But after the Guru Prakash episode, slowly my podcast started scaling up. And I'll be very honest, people, this is not a movement. The Indic civilizational movement is not a movement of stars. It isn't. It is actually a movement that has come from the grassroots. Because when people see potential in you, and I'm the biggest example of this, they give you a lot of support. to be honest, on my own, I would have reached nowhere. I had so many mentors, so many people. Like after the 6, 7 episodes, the first 4, 5 episodes were a challenge in the sense that I had to get people I already knew. But after the sixth, seventh, eighth episode, it was relatively, I don't know the experience for other content creators, but it was relatively easy for me to get whoever I wanted. I would say that 80% of the people I approached said yes. And it didn't require, like in most cases, it didn't require considerable effort. At this point, that number is probably 90, 95%. But to start itself at such a high number with very little subscribers, and people not asking that question was quite an achievement. And I would say that in most cases, after the podcast, I definitely uh, would say that the people who came on the show felt that it was worth their while. So I would say that is something I wear as a badge of honor. For people to feel that way. Sometimes it's a vibe, and sometimes people would say that. So yeah, I mean, I would say that this podcast definitely helped me in terms of organizing my thoughts, organizing and running a show together, and also connecting with smart people with whom probably I would have never gotten the time of the day, to be very honest, if I met them on a street. And it became
Tell us a
Deepak.
little about the process of creating an episode.
So it became like a visiting card.
Okay.
So it was a way that helped me connect to people that I have a podcast. Let's have a conversation, And the thing that I really liked the most, of course, the viewers get the chance to see the conversation, but the conversation that I had leading to the show was the most amazing thing because you know the man or the woman behind who they are. So I'll tell you. So it starts with,
Interesting.
yeah, so it starts with, let's say I find somebody on Twitter or I find somebody on a YouTube channel, a guest or a host, whoever it is. They have a very well art. So there are two ways in which I reach out to my guests. Sometimes the guest is someone I want, and the topic finds itself. Some other times it's a topic that I want to cover, and then I find backwards, work backwards to find the right guest for it. So it happens both ways. Usually, it's the guest that I want to get, but sometimes it's the topic as well. But in most cases, it's the guest. And of course, I want that guest because there is a certain topic that he or she has spoken on, which is I feel very interested by it, or I want to learn more about it. So I kind of reach out to the guest either via an email or through Twitter, or actually quite a few on Instagram as well. There have been a few guests that I have got uh, through Instagram. This is kind of interesting. Actually, this has happened quite a bit off late. Like, for example, a few interesting stories about getting the right guests, right? Anupama Singh was someone who liked my reel on Instagram with Sohail Seth. And I just reached out to her because she was a verified account. I just saw what she does, and she's someone who hosts shows with big Bollywood celebrities. So I was like, wow, this is an interesting person I could call on my show, and I connected with her on Instagram. Suvir Saran is a 5-star Michelin chef. He liked my show, and not just that, he even DM'd me saying that he found it quite interesting. And I was like, wow, that's great. And I went and checked out his Instagram profile. He had put some amazing cook recipes, and I had never heard of him. But when I checked up and dug deeper on him, he seemed like an amazing person. I instantly sent him a voice note saying that I want to call you on my show. And he was like, yeah, let's do it. So, I mean, there have been times when the guest itself has kind of connected on Instagram, and then I've got them on my show. And yeah, I think the first guest that I ever the guest reached out to me, the first time itself was Anuradha Goyal. and I did a show with her on the history of travel in ancient India. She reached out to me, to be on my show. So that was quite and it was probably 7 or 8 months into my show. And the fact that I got, like, someone reached out to me is a big thing, because it was always me scampering for someone's time. So that was amazing. And most importantly, recently something very interesting happened, which is someone who has not been on my show actually. So you must be aware of Akshay Patra Foundation. So they are like uh, a
Right.
dharmic charitable trust who runs, kitchens for poor people in Bangalore, I believe, and a few other cities as well. So I always wanted to reach out to someone from the Akshay Patra Foundation, and the head of the Akshay Patra Foundation, I kind of reached out to someone from his team through Roshan from the Bharat Varta show, because I wanted to call them on the show, and he gave me his number. I reached out to some his points man, and when took the phone and introduced myself, that, hello, I'm Vineet from Mumbai from the Indic Explorer show. He just cut me and he said, yeah, I know about you, you don't have to explain. I was like, wow, that's the first time that somebody already knew about me. That's when I felt like, okay, I think I have arrived, so to speak. So he was like, yeah, yeah, don't no need to tell about your show, I already know it. My Someone in my family had shared your video, and I really liked the video, and I told the head of Akshay Patra that, probably we should approach him and go on his show. I was like, what? What was that? I mean, that was quite a shocker for me. And he was like, they were hesitant in terms of if the content that they would provide would be a good fitment for the show or not. I was like, absolutely a great fitment. So that was quite an amazing experience. Of course, we've not done the show yet, and it's coming up very soon in the coming month or two. So we will be having the head of Akshay Patra Foundation on the Indic Explorer show. The other interesting thing was, probably 7 or 8 episodes in, Umar Ali reached out to me from the Brown Pundits podcast and said that, I had already been on the show, of course, but he and I had known Razib as well through Razib and Mukunda from a Clubhouse. So they wanted me to kind of post videos of my show and write for the Brown Pundits, which I did. And I think that also got me a few views. Of course, my podcast with P Gurus, Shri Iyer ji has been quite helpful, Vibhuti Jha as well, and that also helped give my show quite a bump initially. So, yeah, I think that was quite an interesting experience. And one thing that I would like to talk about is that because of my friend Vishal Chaturvedi, who's a filmmaker, and I used his home as a studio, as a makeshift studio. I shot 3 episodes actually, two of which with Nityanand Mishra ji, whose the episodes are still quite viral even today. So it was good to do an like an off screen, not an online show. That was a great experience to have, with multiple camera angles and all of that. So it's been quite a whirlwind journey, actually. To be honest, if even if I wanted to do the podcast, I myself would never have given myself a chance to reach where I have today in my wildest dreams. So yeah.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. So tell us a little about how do you prepare your guests to get them on your show? Do you talk to them beforehand? Do you tell them what questions they're going to be asked, or do you spring it at them like a surprise?
So
What's the process to get your guest comfortable? How do you do
So
that?
first, I have a chat with them. Uh, I ensure that in the limited time, 10-15 minute window, whatever it is, I make an impact, in the sense that they should know the trailer of what the podcast will be in the conversation itself. So I think one is to display authenticity based on, of course, once my podcasts had taken off. If anybody would ask me, my YouTube channel is my CV, and the kind of guests and the topics that I have covered. uh, people do feel it is quite authentic, thankfully so. So yeah, I mean, I've had people like Arvind Sharma, who I would have never thought I would have gotten a chance to speak with, or Vamsi Juluri also. So the kind of guests that I have got in the past, the topics that I have covered, I would share with them in case they ask, not on my own. But essentially I would establish a certain rapport coupled with authenticity in my first telephonic conversation or my email that I share with them. So I have some template in terms of what I want to talk about. And once that rapport has been established, usually if it's an informal rapport, it's even better. So, with Sri Iyer, I had with Abhijit Iyer Mitra, I had a great informal rapport much before the show. And of course, that led to some hilarious consequences as well, which we'll come to later. So, once that is established, some
We'll come to that later. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. If a casual rapport is established, to be very honest, that is better than a serious rapport, but it also depends on the person. So I have to fine tune my approach based on how they are responding or the vibes that they are giving. So if they are formal, right? Especially if it's a person from the military or something, someone who's a little more formal in the corporate sector or something like that, then I go very formal. But if there is an informal rapport established based on maybe some common interest or passion area, then that I think helps more, although it's counterintuitive. Because then they collaborate with you to make your show better. I don't know if I can, if this can go across, because this is something that you need to experience. But they do sometimes collaborate with you to make your show better, which is a game changer of a different kind. They will retweet. I'll give you an example, and this is amazing. Tehseen.
Give me three examples.
Okay, great. So Tehseen Poonawala. Okay, so I've had both the Poonawala brothers on my podcast. My show is not political, to be very honest. It is cultural. It is socio-cultural. So I had called Tehseen Poonawala on my show, and although he comes from a different leaning, we had a great conversation. We had a great conversation before the podcast. In fact, we spoke. Sometimes a conversation is not just one. We spoke 3 or 4 times leading up to the show for almost a month, I think, or three to 4 weeks at least. And we had a great conversation on a host of issues. Some on where we are headed as a country, some informal as well. And I just want to say that beyond ideologies, he's one of the most amazingly genuine persons that I have come across. So, to some extent, I would say when you're connecting with people, ideology be damned. And you can't go with the attitude of, and people from our side at least would understand this, that you can't go with the attitude of canceling someone else. So, some people did ask me, why am I platforming certain people? There were at least 3 or 4 people. I think after I did some 30-35 episodes, consciously I wanted people from the other side, because otherwise it's an echo chamber, right? So I had someone like Anvesh Satpati, who is like a proper left wing leftist kind of person, not a Marxist, but definitely a left liberal, right? In his own words. So,
Right, very astute thinker. I really like his podcast as well. Worth watching.
yeah, so I like his point of view in the sense that I may not agree with it, but I like the quality and the level of articulation, as well as the argumentation and the way in which the argument is presented in a cohesive way, that how you build a hypothesis and then how you reach a conclusion. And that is something to learn. I felt that he does better than anybody else that I have come across. So that was something that I wanted to learn, and so we did a podcast with him on how liberalism and nationalism can be reconciled, you know and there was healthy debate, but it wasn't from a place of toxicity or from a nefarious kind of reasons. And he saw that genuineness. We actually didn't have a fight at all, and there were things that me and him also agreed on, like you can't have a constitution or just a book that builds a nation. There has to be a cohesive set of values that build a nation. That's something that we agreed on. So there were points of differences, but there were lots of points of agreement as well. And uh, yes, my podcast is not a place where, and podcasting is not the right space where you uh, do shouting matches, because podcast is a more relaxed environment. So you don't have the prime
Your
time.
podcast is a place where people vigorously agree with each
I wouldn't say that. They also do disagree. Like, for example, even with Salvatore Babonis, I kind of disagreed on certain aspects, or certain points that he came from. But we vigorously disagree, but we also engage in healthy debates. I do want to learn, as well as sometimes when I feel, uh, yes, initially I felt like when I was finding my bearings, I wasn't going from the point of disagreeing with people. But I think after a couple of dozen, 20 episodes or so, I think I settled in very comfortably with my dynamic. So after that, I used to vigorously disagree. And of course, the part of calling left liberals was also that I want to vigorously disagree. So with Tehseen, I had a great rapport, even though he was ideologically different. But we vigorously disagreed on many things as well. But as a person, I found him to be quite, open to engaging with people on our side much more than others around him. So that was a healthy difference to be noticed. And I don't have a problem with engaging with people from different sides of the spectrum. I think it is, in fact, I personally feel you can't learn about capitalism unless you've read the Marxist manifesto of Karl Marx. Only when you've read the other side will you know yourself better, because the kind of argumentation that they would come against you actually helps you build your argumentation better. Otherwise, you're just scratching each other's back. So, yeah.
do you find that doing long form podcasts helps you discuss these differences in a non hostile manner? Because if you had to do it in a typical TV debate style format, it comes off as hostile and you don't have that back and forth learning process, right? Do you benefit from doing a long form podcast the way you do it? What's your sense on that?
Yes and no. The yes comes from the fact that you can, of course, have very high quality conversations, which are actually enriching. So, that is true. At the same time, also, when we were talking about disagreeing, right, in a podcast, the disagreement is manifest in different ways, in the sense that you nudge the person. So for example, one tactic that I have used is, I understand where you're coming from, and maybe this is the logic that you're coming from, but stay with me on this thought and tell me what you think about this alternative point of thinking. And you kind of nudge the guest into, showing that maybe there are error in their ways, and what do you think about this. You'll be surprised many times they change their mind on the show. So I mean, so that is one thing. But the no comes from the fact that long form, at least in India, is a very difficult way to grow, especially when you're starting out. I think that maybe short form is a much better way to grow, although it's hard to monetize in short form. But it's because people, especially the younger generation whom the podcast caters to, right, 18 to 35-year-old young working male and female, like men and women, as well as older college students, uh, their attention span is very low. So deeper nuances are harder to go in short form, but that's where probably the growth lies. So probably around 8 9 months into my show, I started my own team. So now I don't do everything on my own. In fact, the only thing I do is recording the show, what I'm doing right now. That's it. The rest of the work is from my team. I have delegated my responsibility complete.
That and calling it, right?
Yeah. So apart from the editing, even the social media, managing the channel, posting, giving editorial feedback, the whole thing has gone to a team, and they do. So that also removes my headache, and I focus on the creative aspects of the show, which I truly enjoy. So that is definitely there. Long form and short form, yeah. So my team actually cuts shorts. So now I'm heavy on shorts. Pretty much 30 days a month, every day there are shorts going on from my past episodes. Some shorts work, some don't. uh, I don't know how much better. So shorts are better than videos, but it's not like I get hundreds of subscribers because of shorts. You'll get a four, five, six, seven, maybe here or there. Not all shorts actually leads to increase in subscribers. They do get exposure to your channel, but people just scroll through the reel. So I'm not very sure how subscribers help in that place. The challenge is to break through that glass ceiling, right now I have around 1900 subscribers. So probably I'll get to 2000 very soon, not too far. But I think you need to at least touch the threshold of 5000 for your videos to organically take off. For you not to have to share your videos to people on your WhatsApp groups, where your videos just organically take off from ground zero. So I would say that I'm still I haven't still gotten there. Long form is great for me as a person, but I think shorts is what people are going big after. But I think probably this is what my understanding is, that the thing that will probably give me the best growth, and this is also because I have not tried it yet, is the mix of two. Probably a 10 to 15-minute video, an explainer video, or a monologue, which I haven't still, like, I've been procrastinating on that a lot. That's something that I haven't tried. And I think that is one format probably which Sham Sharma does, and that may give me faster growth.
Okay, that's quite interesting. I didn't know it was this nuanced. So now that that's done, let's move to the next round. This is where you're going to get into trouble. This round is called politically correct.
Or
So
incorrect.
I know you've endeavored to stay very, yeah, very politically correct throughout this podcast. This episode is what is going to smash that.
Okay.
It's going to go viral because you're going to say things that are scandalous, outrageous, and you're going to get into trouble.
Okay.
Are you ready for this round?
Sure.
So I am going to ask you a series of political questions, and you have to give me your answer. It can be as correct as you want, but it will be political.
Okay. I'll try to be as spontaneous as possible.
First question: what are your thoughts on whether gay marriage should be recognized in India or not?
Uh, I would say gay unions, definitely legitimate unions between two homosexual. Like in my view, any adult, uh, who are not from the same family, should be allowed by law. Any non-incestuous adults should be allowed to get together and have whatever personal physical relationship that they want to do. I don't think it is the state's responsibility to interfere in the private lives of individuals. So I think homosexuals, transsexuals, they deserve their rights, and whatever union that they want to engage in, it should be allowed and legally sanctioned. And the reason I use the word union is for a different reason, because in marriage in India is a divine contract, and it's between a man and a woman. So when I say union, it's a parallel institution which you're creating, which does not in any way jeopardize the existing heterosexual institution, which has some religious sanction as well in India, being a religious country, considering our realities. But at the same time, a union gives you rights. At the same time, there are certain things like child
Right.
rights, etc., which work differently. So I think homosexuals need a different set of laws which protect them. So from that perspective, I think I support unions which are legally sanctioned.
Would you make a legal case for that as well, in the sense that a lot of these laws relating to marriage and rights relating to marriage, the legal language has man and woman
Correct.
and male, female,
Correct.
husband,
Correct.
wife in it, right? So you would have to change several tens of laws
Correct.
in order to get this change.
So it's better
So
to
for
create
that
new.
reason, for just legal simplicity's perspective,
Yeah,
that's what you're saying, right?
absolutely. Create something new.
Okay.
Give them, and as far as rights like property rights, inheritance, etc., are concerned, domestic violence, whatever is valid in the marriage institution should be there in the union institution as well. So those basic laws of course, should be given. But there are certain other things that will, like adoption, etc., will work
And you
differently
believe,
for homosexuals. So I would suggest that a parallel institution works better. Yeah.
okay. Do you believe they should all be created under special acts, or do you believe that it should also be under the religious acts?
My view on this is actually very different. I believe there should be a uniform civil code. I don't think that there should be religious personal laws at all. So I am someone who supports UCC.
Okay.
So as far as I'm concerned, whether the marriage is religious or not, whether you're an atheist or not, all your I support the uniform civil code for all Indian citizens. Period. That's it.
Hitting it off the bat. Okay, let's go to the next question. You said you're interested in geopolitics podcasts. So I want you to give me your perspective on which are the three countries that have their interests most closely aligned with India. Who would you say are our three best friends in the world?
Because we like to play non-alignment, none of the conventional superpowers like the US, China of course can't be our friend. US or Russia also, I don't think, uh, although many people try to claim either of the two, I don't think they each uh, are most aligned with us. They care about their priorities more. So I would say that the countries which are best aligned with our geopolitical objectives are three. Number one, Israel, of course, goes without saying, for a lot of reasons. Uh, Surrounded by a lot of enemy countries. It's
It's really
also,
hitting it off the bat.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Geopolitics is an area where I don't really pull any punches. So Israel, because Judaism, while being a monotheistic Abrahamic religion, is an ethnic religion. It's tied to an ethnicity, and also they have a holy land. And in a way, you can say our sacred geography is also, in that sense, a holy land. Although we don't follow the chosen people hypothesis, but still, so there are a lot of things that you know uh, that are uh, that are similar, not culturally, but in terms of certain aspects of where we stand geopolitically are similar. So I would say that Israel is one. Second, I would say, to be honest, even above Israel, this nation I would place is France. And there is a reason why Macron, despite being a French leftist, whatever you call that, is coming to the Republic Day parade. And I don't think it's for the first time. France has been a country which always wanted to maintain
I don't think you'd agree with your characterization of calling him a leftist.
left leaning, whatever you,
He's a centrist.
center left, whatever. Yeah, yeah. He's moving center
Huh,
now, but I would essentially say that he was center left, but he's moving much more to the center now, especially on immigration.
okay.
So, I think France, without a shadow of doubt, because their geopolitical objective is geopolitical ambiguity. European Union, United States, they want to balance everybody. And we, of course, are we are the masters of non-alignment. So our maintaining ambiguity is our favorite national pastime. Sometimes I don't understand why. I mean, we follow the one China policy more than China. China itself follows. They do more trade with Taiwan than we do. So, anyways, so France, is a nation. If you notice that they gave us the Rafale, and of course, Abhijit Iyer Mitra has said this, that the Rafale can actually give us the capability to deploy nuclear warheads through our aircrafts to Beijing. And it is not, of course, directly given by France, but we have the capability to do that. So France is a country that I think is highly underrated. We need to develop our relationship much more with France. Uh, and of course, the third country that I can think of is Japan. They give us very low interest loans. They are involved heavily in infrastructure projects. And I believe that with Japan, we have economic synergy. We could be their manufacturing base. We can help them in digitization. There is cultural synergy. There are Buddhist groups in Japan who have deep links with Hindu and Indian civilization from the past. They look at India as a civilizational equal, and the people to people contacts are also quite positive. So there are lots of things of synergy with Japan. So these three, but I think India needs to also expand its geopolitical footprint, and we need to look at Southeast Asia. I've extensively traveled in these countries, and I believe that there is an opportunity that we have lost, and we need to rekindle the dharmic spirit of Southeast Asia, which is lying dormant and ready for the taking.
That is a wonderful answer. I like it. Excellent choices. So now let's go to the next question. As an Indic modernist, how do you balance between development and preservation in the sense of historical preservation as well as environmental, ecological preservation? Where do you draw the
Those
line?
two things those two things are not a contradiction at all. In fact, development in a sustainable way is the way for Indic modernity. I think that is where it is. It is actually this unbrindled growth with no control and checks and balances, which is the problem, because then we do not see in the quest for development, we forget what we are losing. So, any decision that we take on economic development has to do not just the cost benefit analysis in terms of revenue outcomes, but also look at societal and environmental outcomes. So I think those two things have to go hand in hand. And in certain places, yes, there will be grace. And that is where we need to see how much do we give away versus how much do we get. That's a question that needs to be asked every time when these things go into gray. So I don't think we can go back to the stone age living in caves and living as primitive people. We are now a modern capitalist civilization, at least that. I mean, we are not capitalist in our governance, but that is where we need to move towards. So we can't be living as primitive peoples. At the same time, we can't be just engaging in rampant deforestation. So I think we need to balance both of those two things where we progress.
So free market, state capacity, and some degree of regulation.
Absolutely,
Depending on the issue, it might the balance may change.
the state's job is to regulate and just look at these some excesses of the free market, so that the environment is not damaged. But I largely feel that we need to have a free market, free trade as well, and these two things. And the third cornerstone, which I believe should be free movement of people. And when I say free movement of people, there is a limiting factor to it. The free movement of people happening between countries or peoples with whom we have synergy, either economically. So, for example, I would support a free movement of people between India and South Korea, because even though there are certain dharmic links, economically, I feel that having free movement of people between the two countries helps, but also culturally and civilizationally. So Tibetan Buddhist refugees make a lot of sense for us to have, because there are certain civilizational synergies. So there should be freer movement of people, but certain people. And this is something that, if you notice, it's not very exclusive just to India. It is there in the West also. Like, for example, Protestant or non-Orthodox Christians in Russia do get a faster road to citizenship in the United States, right? There are people in Hong Kong get faster road to citizenship in the United Kingdom, but that is not given to all Chinese people, right? So they are discriminating between the Chinese. That Hong Kong Chinese people are more in synergy with British civilization, but the other Chinese are not. So they do that. Same with the Americans as well, right? There are Assyrians who live in the Middle East who get a faster, or even Lebanese Christians who get faster road to citizenship in Western countries. I mean, so that happens. So definitely cultural question, civilizational question, and in certain cases, I would say economic question as well. For example, Japan and India, if we have a free movement of people, of course, in most cases, I think the movement will happen from India outward. So there is no that has its own benefits. There is going to be greater, because uh, our countries now, although the population TFR rates are normalizing, uh, there is still a lot of excess capacity. So some people can actually go. And we could even, in my view, with certain countries have provisions for dual citizenship, like for example Japan. So I believe it should be a case to case basis rather than a one size fits all.
Right. It should be bilateral with different countries rather than a national policy that works for every country. Right. Okay. That's great. Next question will be, all studies show that learning outcomes for Indian students is still much poorer than it could be. How would you, in the next 10 to 15 years, advocate for education reform that improves learning outcomes across the board? Because that typically shows a significant developmental impact with some lag. But every country we've seen in East Asia, when they've managed to improve educational outcomes, it does lead to more economic complexity and it leads to more economic growth and better quality jobs, and also coincidentally better health and longer lifespans. So how would you address that?
So, firstly, as far as health aspect is concerned, we have the midday meals program. I really feel that it should be done even at a greater expanded scale. And I also feel that our schooling system is actually broken. Public schooling is in shambles. If you remove the Kendriya Vidyalayas, most of the other regular government schools, I mean, nobody who's aspirational will put their children through those schools. Learning outcomes will improve only when our educational system becomes more practical. Right now it's very theoretical. It doesn't prepare us for modern challenges, for global challenges. I believe our population, our youth is not ready to take on the world. So Vishwaguru is all very good on paper, but we are far from that, because schools are the place where we are actually building the citizens for the future. So unless our educational systems becomes more practical, we remove especially the rote learning aspects, and we build more creative and critical thinking aspects in our educational system, and we incentivize based on those, right? Incentives have to come. That needs to happen. There has to be more industry collaboration with our higher institutes, and not just IITs. This obsession with just IITs and IIMs is a bigger problem. We need to actually focus on improving the second tier educational institutions. I think that is very, very key, because those are the ones where there are higher footfalls, more people seeking admissions. We have to increase the number of educational institutions. We have to allow more private people to come into this. We can't be putting hundreds of laws for them to, follow, for them to get permits to start educational institution. This license permit Raj, especially of course for Hindu institutions who want to establish educational setups, is a huge problem. And I think, in my view, uh, sometimes I feel right to education is actually doing a lot of disservice to education in India. I think that sometimes in certain spaces, uh, probably having educational institutions which are not following all those laws but are still providing last mile access, because in our country the last mile access to education is so important. Because you don't follow certain things, you're not going to get a school in a certain village. It doesn't work like that. So in my view, we need a free market in education. Government can be there to solve certain problems, but I want a very limited involvement of the government, regulated only to, in terms of mandating the policies and also the educational curriculum, which of course needs a lot of update. But schools and colleges need to be there in the private sector. And I really believe that educational vouchers, which are used in Nordic countries, you know where the government actually gives vouchers to citizen, like it funds them to choose their school of choice, I think would go a long way. I don't think that government should back out completely, but it should have a very, very limited role. I want a very high involvement of private sector in education. That's where it will improve. And foreign educational institutions should be allowed in all spheres of education, especially in STEM and in schooling systems. but not in social sciences. They should be banned from social sciences.
Yeah, I understand why you're saying that. That's pretty thoughtful answer, though. Appreciate that. So now we're getting to the final question of the politically correct round. This is going to be the hardest. So this addresses a conspiracy theory. Are you familiar with the WEF, the
Yeah,
World Economic
yeah.
Forum? So it is led by a man named Klaus Schwab. And there is a conspiracy theory around it called the Great Reset. So it essentially says that the World Economic Forum and global elites are using pandemic lockdowns and vaccine mandates as tools to consolidate power to undercut individual sovereignty, with the ultimate goal of manufacturing a global communist society and taking away people's rights. So this theory has gained traction on both the far right and the far left. The interesting part about this theory is that your friend Abhijit Iyer Mitra believes that the WEF conspiracy is an Iyengar conspiracy. He has explicitly said that Klaus Schwab is a secret Iyengar. Now, I want to hear your take on whether your friend is right, or do you want to demolish the libel that he is throwing against Iyengars like us?
No, so if you want, do you want a serious answer or? Well,
I am very serious. Do you
I
believe that there is a global Iyengar conspiracy or not to build a communist society and take away everyone's rights?
Iyengars are free market capitalist pamphleteers. It is actually an Iyer conspiracy to establish Iyer hegemony through the instruments of state power of communism. So it's Iyer communists who are trying to spread the virus of communism and socialism in this country, and it is only the Iyengars who will deliver the world from this Iyer Marxist conspiracy. Which also they are. I'm telling you, Iyers are Freemasons.
Explain that.
The Illuminati are Ayers. The Freemasons are Ayers. All the conspiracy theory groups, the Rothschilds in the West, the family that controls the global banks,
Right.
they are all Ayers.
Banking.
They are Ayers. They are crypto
Okay.
Ayers. They've been wanting to conquer the world
Okay.
through all kinds of instruments, and yeah, the world needs only us Iyengars. You two are one. So please join me in my crusade against Ierism. And where is the thank you for the Poonal? Where is everybody needs to make Puliyodrai as the national dish in this country?
Yes, absolutely. We are the last hope for humanity.
Yes.
So, why is your friend Abhijit spreading such canards against us? He's gone on various podcasts and said this,
See, the thing is that
the WEF conspiracy.
he's gone on various podcasts and said that Putin is an Iyengar. He says that Zelensky is also an Iyengar. How will two Iyengars fight each other when there are Iyers like him lurking in the playground? They will want to attack him first, no? So, well, all this conspiracy theory is because, Ayers have never learned to make good puliyodrai and when pongal with gotse. So, they need to learn those things and eat those things to, and especially Abhijit, that will probably help them understand what the global conspiracy is. But as far as I'm concerned, these podcasts have always presented one point of view. They have never allowed the presentation of the Iyengar point of view. Only Sri Iyer has allowed for that. And yeah, I have presented my response to this Iyer hegemon, the Iyer dictator in chief, the Arch Bitches of Mylapore. I am the Archduke
Right.
of the Iyengars. So I have done a three-part video
Link will
series.
be in the description below.
Absolutely, you guys should check it out if you need to know what the Iyengar response is, and
Yes,
you will see
please.
that. And I'll leave it to the jury of the viewers in their wisdom to decide who won that war, the three-part series.
This is the single most important issue that we will ever discuss on this podcast. There is nothing more important than taking down the Iyer tyranny that we are living under.
Absolutely.
Everywhere in the world, it's an Iyer tyranny. That's it's unseen, it's hard to perceive, but once you notice it, you can never stop noticing it. They are everywhere.
They are taking over the world. They are the Illuminati, I'm
And the
telling
only way
you.
to free the world.
Absolutely. We will deliver the world.
But there are good ayers.
That's an oxymoron.
There are ayer traitors who
They are all
I
traitors.
would say have done they're traitors to the ayer costs.
There is no higher cause. It's taking over the world. They
I will give you
no, there are no.
I will give
Hold
you
on. By that definition, they are not traitors. They are very true to that cause. All of them.
so they are true to that cause, but I'll give you a traitor to the cause of ayer tyranny, which is Sri Ayer, because he is given a chance to promote your podcast. And your explicit aim in setting up this podcast is to break the Iyer tyranny.
1 second. I hereby declare Sri Iyer as a crypto Iyengar. I declare him as an honorary Iyengar who is masquerading as an Iyer to take down the Iyer conspiracy. We need a few, no? We need our spies.
Absolutely. So he's one of us.
Absolutely. Honorary Iyengar. Anybody who does a good job, I on the comment section of those videos, I declare them as Iyer honorary Iyengar, and then they write their name and then they put the Iyengar title after it to declare themselves. So that's something that I did. So
Right.
there are Jain Iyengars as well on my comment section. So yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, we are uniting all Hindus under the banner of Iyengarism.
Absolutely.
Okay, so now let's have a rapid fire round.
Okay.
Plenty of shows where this is done. You know how this works.
Yes.
I'm going to ask you questions and you need to immediately give me answers, whatever comes to your
Okay.
mind. It can be one word, two words. It's not complicated. One word to describe your podcasting style.
Refreshing.
It's not right away, man. Come on.
Refreshing.
Okay. Tea or coffee?
Tea. I'm a fake Iyengar that way. I don't like filter coffee.
I think you are also part of the IR tyranny. So, what is your favorite podcast other than your own?
Joe Rogan.
Okay. If your life was a podcast title, what would it be?
Work in progress.
Okay. If there is one podcast that you listen to but would not generally admit to listening to, what would it be?
I think it'll be one of the probably wrestling podcasts, especially because the mainstream population doesn't, I mean, thinks of it as a very low bro subculture. So, yeah, one of the wrestling podcasts.
Okay. What's a topic you haven't covered but really want to?
I think I would like to cover the Indian Special Forces. I would like to cover something about the Special Forces
Okay.
lifestyle. Yeah.
Okay. Who are your top three guests on a dream interview list?
Oh my God. Okay. India, global, like what?
Anyway, top three, right away.
Okay.
One, two, three, four, five.
Makarand,
You're taking too much
yeah,
time. Come on.
Makarand Deshpande, definitely number one.
Okay.
So he would be first. Second, someone from India's cabinet, and I will come to that.
Okay.
Some a minister from India's cabinet, definitely. It could be.
You have something lined up?
Uh, yeah, I am trying to. I'm in touch with a minister's office, and I'm hoping to kind of crack it and get them on the show.
Okay, that is incredible.
Yeah. So I cannot tell the details
Okay.
because
So your audience has something to look forward
yeah,
to.
I can't tell the
Huh.
details, but yeah, there is someone in one of the ministries, a cabinet minister ranked person, whose office, not the minister himself or herself, but their office I'm in touch with. So hoping that that comes through soon.
Okay.
So someone from there. And the third person that I would like to call on my podcast is actually Vivek Ramaswamy. Or actually, Vivek Ramaswamy and Tulsi Gabbard, both of them.
Oh,
So four people actually,
okay.
because
Huh.
I believe they represent
Very
us
interesting.
in our culture in the Western world. They are of course not Indians; they are Americans. But
Okay.
yeah, the culturally they are our biggest brand ambassadors there. So both of them actually.
What is a favorite podcasting tip or hack?
Let the guests talk so that you don't have to work too hard.
If your podcast had a mascot, what would it be?
It'll probably be a line because I would like to imagine my podcast as like the king of podcasts. So yeah, the lion, and also it's the symbol of the Mauryan Empire. I like the lion as an animal. It's the king of the
Okay.
jungle. So
What?
yeah.
Huh. Yeah, that's right. What is one dumb thing that you believed as a child that now you're embarrassed that you ever believed?
Dumb thing. I think that environment is the be all and end all, and we should all just go back to very simple green living. Like, forget about the modern world and the concrete jungle and just live in forests and live as nomads or maybe just as farmers, very close to nature. So this is something I there was a
Okay.
environmental club in our school, so it kind of made me idealize environmental living a lot. Like I of course do
Hmm.
subscribe to certain things, but I'm not an environmental supremacist.
Okay. So I have two last questions for you. You have to answer these right away when I ask.
Okay.
You don't get time to think. First, what is one thing women should know about men? Go.
That we also have feelings and we cry.
Okay. Good answer. Then last question. What is the meanest thing someone has said about your podcast?
Meanest thing. Oh, this is a hard one.
You can't take time to
Oh
think.
my god. No, this is I mean I'm really trying to think what was the mean thing. I mean yeah, I'll tell you. Get rid of the glasses man.
Wow. Yeah, that is mean. Okay, so with that, we've come to the end of your rapid fire round. Well done, Vineet. Since you are not competing against anyone else, I guess you have won. Um, let's move on to some other questions that I wanted to ask, which I think aspiring podcasters will find helpful. So tell us a little bit about your music intros. You've changed them up quite a bit over the course of your podcasting journey, and I'm sure everyone who's watched the podcast regularly will know that. What is the story behind that? How do you decide which music intro to use? Are you experimenting? What's really going on there?
So I got this. So basically, there is a podcast that I used to watch on YouTube, and they had great music. So I tweeted to the podcaster. He's from Bangalore, and asked him how where does he get his music from. So he told me Epidemic, and that's a great app. And I started listening to a lot of rock beats, and I felt like even if you see my logo, it is actually a dharmic mandala design, a Hindu Buddhist mandala, and it unveils itself. That was actually my idea, which I told my editor to incorporate. It unveils itself to rock music. So it's like a coming together of, in some ways, I'm trying to use it as a surrogate for modernity. But yeah, so it is like a fusion of coming together of the past and the present. So I liked a lot of music, and there was a lot of shows, especially last beginning of this year, that I did uh, where I used to introduce the show by unveiling the topic and the guest and what who they are and the topic as well, in a very catchy, peppy way before the show starts. So people get a very good idea. So there are some shows that I would highly recommend people check out. One was my show with Ram on Kalaripait, that has a brilliant intro opener. Then there is a show with Malvika Sundar, which is one of my favorite shows because it is on Carnatic music, and it has quite a the show opener has quite a great it's great. The visuals are amazing. At least I like them. You guys should check out and tell me if you do. Then there is a show that I did with Vikram Dev Dogra, who is who is in the military, and again where I introduced about him without talking, but just through a small package for 2 minutes. So this intro is pieced together with which I don't do as often anymore because it's a lot of work. So it's pieced together with some catchy music, some images about the topic, about the guest, which flip through the screen, which gives an idea about the person, the guest, and what I'm trying to do, and then I start the show straight up. I don't have to talk much after that. So it is these intros are not the editor's creation. I write detailed scripts as to which music track to take, what should be shown in the screen at what timestamp, and the editor just executes it. So that is how it works. And I hallucinate over it for weeks together. So it's not like a day's, like it's not spontaneous. It's quite thought out. So I would really request people to check out some of my episodes with the show intros.
Hallucinate. Okay. Uh, so the next question I had was, once you record an episode, how long does it typically take? What is the process before it finally gets published on your YouTube?
Once
How
I
many hours of work is it generally?
once I record my episode, I'm done. I probably have a 5 to 10 minute meeting with the social media team as to what we are going to do, and that's it with my contribution. So I have a team which handles the social media posting, the channel posting, the editorial inputs. There is a group of 4 5 girls who started a digital marketing agency, and I had reached out to them, and they had a very good story. They are all in their early 20s. So it's basically they had a very interesting story, and they were trying to kind of strike it out on the world. So I thought that it would be good to take them under my wing, and of course initially they made a few mistakes, but they have grown quite a bit. And I think that yeah, so that was one part, working with them, mentoring them. That is great. And then my editor, of course, now I have one stable editor.
Excellent. We cheers to Vineet for increasing the female labor force participation rate. It's very important in our country, and it's growing. It's an optimistic trend. So good on you for doing that. Go on.
Yeah, so the editor probably works for my podcast is usually 50 minutes to 50 to 70 minutes, so slightly more than an hour or slightly below an hour. So I would say it's a ratio of 1:3. If it's a 1 hour podcast, you will probably have editing work of 3 hours. Depends, again, it's a big thumb rule, but it's necessarily not always exact like that, but approximately 3 hours. I stopped using my show intros in my recent episode because I noticed that sometimes people skip it, or sometimes it's because people want to come to the podcast section, and also the intro takes more work. So typically it's 3 hours of work on a 1 hour podcast. Usually there are two cuts, like one level of cut goes to the social media team. They'll give their inputs. Sometimes I might add my inputs as well, but usually don't. It depends on the nature of the show and the guest. And then the editor will do a second cut, which will usually be less time, probably less than an hour. The editor will also, sometimes the social media team, sometimes the editor, they work on the thumbnail. There is a short that is made, short reel clip that is posted for every episode. And there are, of course, there is things like time stamping. There is also, my podcast is available on all audio platforms: Spotify, JioSaavn, Ghana, you name it. There is no excuse to not listen to my show or watch my show. It's there in almost all the major platforms. So yeah, it's all of that. So from a social media perspective, probably it will be, because you're posting shorts every day as well, so it's an ongoing task. So it's usually from start to finish, it takes a week from creation to upload for the podcast to go out. So 6 to 7 days.
Okay, that's quite interesting. So now that you've told us that, I have only a couple more questions left for you, and then we'll wrap up this podcast because I think we've hit nearly an hour and a half. It's been a great time. So the next question is, Vineet Vijayaraghavan, are you afraid of being cancelled by the social media mob? Go.
Well, I don't think, yeah. In a sense, I would say I used to be at some point, not so much now, because I'm not someone who is engaging in controversy or trending issues. I'm trying to look at the macro picture of our culture and civilization. So I don't think there is anything controversial in anything that I'm trying to do. When I was starting out, of course, I was not very sure because even my own thoughts were kind of building through. But now that I've found a sure foot for myself, I'm not really that bothered by this thing because I don't think my work is on that side. I am focused around culture and civilization. And to be very honest with you, a lot of leftists have even told me that they actually find my way of engaging to be quite interesting, and I'm someone that they will engage with. So
That is the best compliment you can get.
yeah, not that I'm hunting for compliments from them, but yeah, it is.
Of course, you are. Please.
No, 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 not at all. But the fact that even if we
You are dying for recognition.
no, recognition, yes, but not necessarily from any section or anything like that. But yeah, people
I
from the
see.
opposing side have also said that, they have recommended my show. So I don't think I'm worried at all about that because I have friends on both sides, and yeah, people will stand up for me. Whether it's people from the LGBTQ movement, whether it is dharmic people, traditionalists, or leftists. I have friends everywhere, and I would have probably a character certificate written for me from all sides. So I'm kind of fine.
Right. Something I should share with the audience about Vineet is that he genuinely loves it when people interact with his content. So if you share it, if you like it, if you comment, I think he's really okay even if you have criticism. He might reach out to you if you have criticism. In fact, like leave it in the comments. Say whatever you feel like. You can insult him. He's fine with that also.
As long as you're not
Um,
an IR, you
but
can. Yeah.
yeah, that's the only
Yeah.
criteria. But really, like he's very open to all manner of criticisms, but he really wants more engagement. That is in every episode. I can tell you like what he's really looking for is more people watching, more people engaging, because that is what keeps podcasters growing, right? And if you want more content like what he's doing, which is a lot of it is really really good high quality content, you need to give it more likes, you need to give it more subscribe, you need to pass it on to more people, and even people who will hate watch it, right? Like there are people who are going to disagree with what Vineet is saying or Vineet's guests are saying, some of whom will have controversial views. Like he got the Poonawala brothers who are known to have very strong views on things. There are people who will not like them, and there are people who will strongly agree with them. Point is, more people should watch this content and say what they think about it. Engaging with it in terms of actual comments really matters. So, with that, I will ask you the next question. What are your future plans with this podcast? Where are you planning to go with this? Do you intend to get a Netflix series of your own or write a book? And there is this concept called posting to policy pipeline that we've talked about offline. And so, where do you stand on that? Do you think you, with your interviews of influential people, you can get some of your ideas into these policy making spaces and leave a legacy in that way? Like, what's your larger vision? Tell us about that.
When I started this podcast, it was actually one of the main turning eureka moments for me was one of my so in my early 30s, on one of my birthdays, I realized that I haven't really done anything with my life. I haven't left any impact as to, and it's been something that I always wanted to do since the time I have been a kid, that something I must do for the world to, like for me to leave some kind of legacy, some contribution, a stamp that, that impacts society. So this was like the first stone. Actually, this is not really that big of a thing also, but it was like the first step in that direction. Where I see this is, uh, I see this podcast hopefully growing more people engaging, it becoming a very very big podcast with a lots of, like, probably lakhs and millions. That's something every YouTuber wants, that's recognition. But you mentioned about policy. Absolutely, it's unglamorous to say it, but yeah, a real impact is only felt when, and I know you've told me this like a broken drum, that it will only felt not when we are talking in armchairs or on Twitter, but when actually it impacts policy. So definitely, I would like to make an impact in such a way as a thought leader that uh, some initiative gets taken because of something that I have done or written or said, which can lead to impact on people's lives. That is obviously there. I want to grow my podcast. I want to do more, probably more monologues, and also probably write a book at some point, not in the immediate future, but at some point. But most importantly, I want to kind of make a. I have an idea in mind for a short film, and I would like to make a short film. I'm looking for funding for it. It's a story for the search of a dharmic utopia, and it's titled as of now as "Where is Vijayanagar?" So it's a search. It's a road trip kind of a short film. That's a script that I'm working on. So hopefully I can make that short film. I would like to make full length feature films someday, and I would also, the end goal is to probably make I don't know, a TLC or a lifestyle, travel and living kind of show on modern Indian culture, which explores different parts of our culture. So probably a full-fledged show, I don't know, Netflix or some OTT platform, some that would probably be the end game. So that is so yeah, I mean, basically chronicling our Indian modernity as well as some policy initiatives that get driven through my efforts would be something that I would want to do. So yeah, YouTube is a vehicle, it's not the end for me. That's how I see it.
Okay, that is really wonderful, and I'm happy to hear about all your plans. This is the first time we're breaking this news about your short film that's coming up, so that's amazing. Vineet, it's been an absolute pleasure delving into your podcasting journey and gaining insights from the into the incredible work that you do today. I want to extend my heartfelt thanks for sharing your time and stories with us today on the Indic Explorer podcast. To our listeners, thank you for tuning into this special edition of the Indic Explorer show. And remember, you can catch all of Vineet's thought provoking episodes on his channel, and you can also follow him on Twitter at the Indic Explorer. Is it the Indic Explorer
Yeah,
one?
yeah, yeah,
What is
yeah,
your
yeah, yeah,
Twitter handle?
yeah. The Indic Explorer.
Okay, right. So to stay updated on all his latest projects that are coming up. And Vineet, thank you again for being our guest today. It's been an enriching experience, and I'm sure our listeners are as grateful as I am for this opportunity to connect with the person behind the mic. We've learned a lot about your personal story as well. And folks, that wraps up this episode. Keep exploring, keep learning, and I am your host, Deepak Srinivasan, signing off. If you want to follow me, I am at Deepak Insights on Twitter. That will also be in the description. So I have a lot of takes on all manner of controversial topics. So feel free to follow me as well, and stay curious and stay tuned. Bye bye.
Thank you. And yeah, remember Iyengar supremacy.